A few weeks ago, I rented a cabin in the Appalachian Mountains. I needed some solitude after a long week of fieldwork. I thought the peaceful woods would help me heal after my breakup. I'd camped before, but this cabin felt different. It was old and isolated. I still can't shake what happened next. The first night, I set up my gear and made a small fire outside. The sound of the creek was calming. I enjoyed my coffee, feeling at ease. When I went to bed, though, I heard something. It was a faint knocking on the walls. I figured it was the cabin settling, so I rolled over and tried to sleep. But the sound didn't stop. It was rhythmic, like someone was tapping a secret code. I told myself it was just my imagination and let sleep take over. The next morning I brushed off my restless night. I spent the day hiking and collecting samples. But by the second night the noises changed. Now I heard scratching. I shot up from my sleeping bag and rushed to the window. I searched the dark outside. Cold sweat trickled down my forehead. Maybe it was just an animal, but the sounds felt too deliberate. As days passed, I noticed strange symbols carved deep into the trees around the cabin. They didn't look like anything I recognized. I started taking pictures, thinking it would make for great research later. But I felt uneasy as I found more symbols. I also felt like I was being watched. At night I swore I saw shadows darting between the trees. I wanted to blame it on fatigue, but that didn't help the feeling of being not alone. One evening after a tiring day, I walked into the cabin. I found an old photograph on the table. It showed a family outside my cabin, a photo from the late 1800s. I didn't recognize any of them. My heart raced. It felt significant, but I couldn't understand why. I glanced out the window and froze. I thought I saw figures standing among the trees, but when I looked again, they were gone. Doubt crept in. Was I losing my mind? Each night the knocking returned, louder and more frantic. It felt like my grip on reality was slipping. I wanted to leave but felt stuck. Then one night, the knocking changed. It shifted to a voice whispering my name. I felt frozen in place. Is this really happening? The air felt thick around me, pressing down like something unnatural. Then the whispers stopped. A heavy silence enveloped the cabin, making my skin crawl. I took a shaky breath but couldn't move. My heart pounded and I knew I had to get out. Days later, I still feel the weight of those experiences. I can't shake the feeling that whatever was out there is still watching, still waiting. The days dragged on, each one heavier than the last. I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped in that cabin, and my need for answers grew stronger with every scratching noise and whispered name. I packed my gear, determined to investigate the symbols. They were the only thing I could focus on. The sun was just beginning to rise when I headed back into the woods. Mist clung to the trees, and every snap of a twig felt like a warning. My mind raced with questions. What did the symbols mean? Who had carved them? Were they related to the family in that old photograph? I stopped at the first tree I had noticed. The symbol was deep, almost like someone had gouged it into the bark. I pulled out my notebook and sketched it. As I worked, I felt a presence. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone watching me, but of course there was nothing. I continued deeper into the forest, documenting the symbols as I went. They were everywhere, each more intricate than the last. I began to piece together a story from their forms. Some looked like stars, others like animals. They were ancient, or at least felt that way. I wished I had taken a photo of each one. Suddenly, I stumbled across a clearing. In the center was a large stone altar. It was covered in more symbols, similar to those I had found on the trees. My heart raced. This felt like a discovery, but it was also deeply unsettling. I stepped closer, drawn by curiosity and fear. That's when I noticed something on the altar. A small wooden figure. It was crude, resembling a person. Instinctively I reached for it, but my hand hesitated inches away. I felt an overwhelming urge to turn back, to run, but I fought it and grasped the figure. A rush of cold air blasted around me and I dropped it as if burned. The whispers flooded back, but this time they were clearer. You shouldn't have touched it. My heart raced at the sound and I whipped around. Shadows danced at the edge of the clearing, and I fought to focus on them. It felt as if the darkness itself twisted, shifting to encompass me, like something alive was angry at my intrusion. Before I could process it, I turned and sprinted back toward the cabin. I stumbled over roots, my breath quickening. The shadows seemed to follow, darting just out of reach. I didn't dare look back. The whispers intensified, growing louder and more frenzied, drowning out the sound of my own panicked breath. When I finally burst through the cabin door, I slammed it shut behind me, pressing my back against it. I gasped, heart pounding in my chest, feeling like I had narrowly escaped something I didn't understand. But I wasn't safe yet. The whispers resumed, this time closer. I could feel the pressure of eyes pressing against the walls, as if they were trying to break through. I glanced at the window, terrified of what I might see. Then everything went dark. I blinked, trying to adjust to the impenetrable darkness. The cabin, usually so familiar, felt foreign and hostile now. I could hear my own breath echoing in the silence, but the whispers had vanished. It was unsettling, the quiet after the storm of noise. Tentatively, I felt my way toward the window. I needed light. I could hear the night sounds outside, the rustling leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, comforting reminders of life beyond the cabin. With each step, the unease coiled tighter in my chest. As I reached the window, I fumbled for the latch. Opening it would bring the world back, I hoped. The latch clicked open, and I pulled the window up, letting in the cool night air. Moonlight poured in, illuminating the room in a silvery glow. I let out a sigh, but it was short-lived. I glanced toward the altar. Had I left anything behind? Shadows lingered at the corners of my vision, but I squinted and steadied myself. Get it together, I murmured to myself. I grabbed the flashlight from the table and pointed it at the floor. The beam cut through the darkness, and I felt a little braver. I had to go back, I realized. The figure and the symbols, they were important. As I prepared to head out again, a loud thud shook the cabin. It came from the back door. My heart dropped. The sound echoed like a threat, making it impossible to remain calm. I hesitated, gripped by indecision. Should I stay here, or face whatever was lurking outside? Before I could talk myself into action, the thud came again, more insistent this time. It was followed by a faint scraping, like nails dragging against wood. The whispers returned, softer but sharper, more accusatory now. You let it in, they hissed. I shivered, unwilling to accept the implications. Gripping the flashlight tighter, I advanced toward the back door, my mind racing. Who was out there? What did they want? The thought swirled, but there was no way I could ignore it. Cautiously, I approached the door, every ounce of instinct screaming for me to retreat. I peeked out the window by the door. The view beyond was murky under the moonlight. I saw shadows flitting between the trees. Panic clawed at my throat. I took a deep breath and called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" My voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. Silence followed. Just as I was about to retreat, I saw movement. A figure slipped between the trees, too fast for me to make out details. My heart raced again, faster this time, as I tried to process what I had just witnessed. Then it emerged, a small animal darting back into the underbrush. A raccoon. My shoulders slumped a little. But then, just as swiftly, a second shadow flickered behind it, larger and more menacing. It moved with a grace that said, "Predator." My pulse quickened. It wasn't just the raccoon I had seen. Then everything went still. The air felt thick, almost electric. I turned, backing away from the door when I heard a whisper clear as day. "Don't let it take you." That was when I realized I wasn't alone. I felt the chill crawl down my spine. At first I turned to rationalize my fears. Maybe I was just seeing shadows created by the moonlight. But that quiet voice echoed in my mind. Don't let it take you. I backed away from the door, feeling my heart thunder in my ears, each beat urging me to escape. What does that mean? Before I could dwell on it, another thud resonated from the back door, pulling my focus back. I froze, breathless. The scraping noise returned, louder this time, more aggressive. I had to know what was out there. Clenching my jaw and steeling my resolve, I shifted the flashlight's beam toward the door. Maybe if I turned the knob, I could just peek out. A surge of bravery washed over me, mixed with the unshakable urge to flee. I steadied my hand, heart racing, and turned the handle slowly. The door creaked loudly, sending a jolt of fear through me. I stepped outside into the cool night. The air was thick with tension. I swept the flashlight around, its beam cutting through the darkness like a sword. Nothing. Feeling ridiculous for being afraid, I cursed under my breath. I had to assert control. The cabin was mine, after all. "Show yourself," I called, more bravado than bravery in my voice. The forest answered with the wind rustling the leaves, mocking my challenge. I turned back toward the cabin, ready to retreat. But that's when I spotted something on the ground. Flickering in the faint light of the flashlight, it was small and shiny. I knelt down, heart pounding, eager to distract myself from what lurked in the shadows. I reached out and picked up a pendant, its surface cool to the touch. It was shaped like a crescent moon, engraved with strange symbols similar to those I had seen earlier. What was it doing here? I wanted to throw it away, but a sudden instinct urged me to keep it. I tucked it into my pocket, determination rising within me. Whatever was outside, this must reveal something important. Maybe it would help me understand the figure I'd encountered before. Just then another shadow flitted across the edge of the trees. I jerked my gaze toward it, pulse racing. This time, I wasn't going to let my fear win. "Come out," I shouted, voice steadier than I felt, gripping the flashlight tightly as I trained it on the movement. A soft laugh broke the silence, chilling me to the core. It wasn't human. It felt like it resonated from within the earth itself. My stomach dropped. Whatever was out there knew I was here. In that moment, I slammed the door shut, locking it. I panted, hands trembling as I braced against the door. My mind raced with dread. Did I really think I could confront whatever plagued the cabin? Then I heard it, scraping at the front door. I wanted to scream. This was a nightmare come to life. I was trapped, and I had no idea what was waiting for me outside. And then it hit me. The whispers had stopped. The only sound now was the frantic beating of my heart, drowning in the eerie silence. That's when I realized I wasn't just afraid. I was being hunted. I pressed my back against the door, heart hammering as the gnawing sound continued. I felt every scrape beneath my skin. The heavy silence that followed made it feel like the world outside had paused, waiting. I couldn't escape that feeling. I wasn't safe. The cabin felt more like a cage. I padded slowly over to the small window overlooking the porch, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was out there. The wind whispered, brushing against the walls. I pulled the curtain aside just enough to peer through. The darkness was nearly total. Shadows danced, but nothing emerged. Was it watching me? I clenched the pendant in my pocket, desperately wishing I'd figured out what it meant. I needed answers, and I needed a plan. I glanced back at the front door, still resonating with that eerie, persistent scrape. Then I remembered the tools stashed in the small shed out back. Something sharp would make me feel a little better, something to fight with just in case. I made my way to the back of the cabin, trying to be quiet, but the floorboards creaked beneath my weight, nearly drowning out the noise around me. Each step sent panic roaring through my veins. I reached the door and paused. The scraping had stopped. Was it still there? Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open, keeping my flashlight aimed at the ground. A thick mist hugged my ankles as I stepped out into the cool air. The clouds overhead looked restless, shifting like dark thoughts swirling above my head. I could no longer hear the scraping, but a dread settled into my stomach like a stone. I walked quickly toward the shed, praying my instincts were wrong. As I reached for the handle, from the corner of my eye, I spotted something glimmering on the porch. It was the same crescent pendant I'd picked up earlier, but it wasn't the only thing. There were several more, lined up neatly by the edge, each one glinting in the minimal light. What the hell? I swept my flashlight over the collection, and a cold sweat trickled down my back. Each one was identical to the last strange symbols etched into the surface, but the sight of them filled me with a sense of dread rather than curiosity. These couldn't just be coincidences. My thoughts raced as I reached for one of the pendants. As my fingers brushed against the surface, a chill surged through me. Something whispered in the back of my mind, warnings I could barely comprehend. I needed to get inside. Now. I turned to run, but then I heard it, a low growl resonating from the trees at the edge of the cabin. Stopping short, my breath hitched in my throat. It sounded like something was stalking me. I sprinted back to the door, the flashlight bouncing wildly as I fumbled with the knob. I was almost there when I felt it, something tugging at my pocket. The pendant? I whipped around, trying to shake it loose, but it felt as if it was glued to me. That's when I saw it, eyes glowing in the shadows, piercing through the dark, fixated on me. My breath caught, and terror took hold. I yanked the pendant free and stumbled backward. "Don't let it take you." The words echoed in my mind as I desperately slammed the door shut, locking it tight. Whatever hunted me was very real, and I may have just provoked it. I pressed my back against the door to the cabin, trying to calm my breathing. The growl still reverberated in my ears, low and guttural. I waited, frozen, listening for any sign of movement outside. My heart beat painfully against my ribs, louder than the rustle of leaves in the wind. After what felt like an eternity, I gathered the courage to scan the cabin for anything I could use for protection. I rummaged through drawers and shelves until I found a small, rusty hatchet. It offered little comfort, but it was better than nothing. I gripped it tightly, testing its weight in my palm. I stood still for a moment, searching for clarity amidst the chaos in my mind. The pendants lined up on the porch haunted me. Why had they appeared like that? What did they even mean? A chilly breeze seeped through the cracks of the cabin, making me shiver. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something waited patiently just beyond the walls. Then a scratching sound broke the silence again. It was softer this time, almost cautious, as if whatever was out there was testing the door. I shuffled to the window, my fingers tightening around the hatchet. I peered out, but saw nothing. The mist had thickened, wrapping everything in a cloak of gray. I felt the urge to run back to the safety of my room, to escape this maddening uncertainty, but I knew I couldn't stay hidden. I had to figure out how to get out of this situation. I took a deep breath and made my way to the front door, hatchet raised. It was time to confront whatever was out there. As I creaked the door open, the mist swirled in like tendrils, wrapping around my legs. I stepped onto the porch, scanning my surroundings. The sounds were louder now, a chorus of scratching intertwined with distant soft whispers. I barely recognized my own breaths as I moved toward the edge of the porch. I needed to see if the pendants were still there. I hoped they could tell me something, anything about the presence looming over me. When I reached down to pick one up, the ground shifted beneath my feet and I stumbled back. Suddenly the growl returned, louder and closer. My pulse quickened. I turned to look toward the trees, the flashlight beam cutting through the fog. That's when I saw it. A dark shape moving between the trees, its eyes glinting with an unnatural light. It was more than I'd imagined, a monstrous silhouette that twisted and morphed like smoke. In that moment, fear gripped me again, sharper than before. I took a step back, trying to retreat to the cabin, but as soon as I turned, a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking my path. A man? No, this was no man. His features were indistinct, body shifting like a mirage. "Help me." The whispered plea echoed around me, and I staggered back, grasping the hatchet. I had no idea what I was facing, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't let it take me. Not tonight. The figure loomed closer, its shape barely human. I held my breath, heart racing. "What do you want?" I managed to croak out, my voice barely rising above a whisper. "Help me," it repeated, the plea dripping with desperation. I could see its arms now, long and thin, reaching out like branches in the wind. The growling outside faded, but the whispers grew louder, wrapping around me like a thick fog. I could barely think. My survival instincts kicked in, screaming at me to run back inside, to barricade myself against whatever this was. But the urgency in that voice made me hesitate. "Who are you?" I asked, taking a cautious step back. I'm trapped, it said, its voice strained and almost breaking. You must listen. But listen to what? I could hardly wrap my mind around its presence. The air felt charged and an electric pulse thrummed around us. The cabin, the mist, and the trees seemed to merge into one disorienting backdrop, swirling with my thoughts. I needed a plan. My eyes darted toward the forest. The dark shape was still there, lurking but silent now, watching this strange encounter unfold. You're not real, I said, raising the hatchet higher, the only weapon I had. Stay back, please, it croaked again, the image flickering like an old film reel, my vision blurring. They're coming for you. Panic washed over me. Who were they? My mind raced to the pendants. What did they have to do with all of this? Had I awakened something by touching them? The ground beneath me quaked subtly, and I pressed my back against a nearby tree for stability. I had to make a choice, confront this figure or flee back into the safety of the cabin. Tell me how to help you, I said, forcing myself to sound brave. Find the center, it whispered urgently, the heart of the woods. Before I could ask what that meant, a howl erupted from the trees, a chilling sound that cut through the mist. My heart sank deeper into my chest. I turned my flashlight toward the sound, revealing the dark shape morphing into something much larger and far more terrifying. The creature was no longer a mere shadow, but a brute, lumbering forward with a feast of teeth and hunger reflected in its eyes. Run! The pleading voice became frantic, and instinct took over. I spun around, sprinting toward the cabin. I hurled myself through the door and slammed it shut, heart pounding, but it was too late. The world behind me was a blur of shadow and sound, and it felt like the creature was right on my heels. I could hear the first thuds of its body against the cabin door. I had to hold it together. As I backed away, my eyes scanned the room, seeking anything that could help me understand what was happening. Then I spotted it, the last pendant, glowing faintly on the table. This had to be the connection to whatever was going on, but would using it help? I edged closer to the table, recalling the figure's haunting words. My fingers grazed the pendant, and as I picked it up, everything went dark. Suddenly I was alone in a vast expanse of shadow, faint whispers echoing all around me. My breath hitched in my throat. I had no idea where I was, but one thing was clear. The worst was yet to come. The darkness began to shift, swirling around me like a living entity. I could feel pressure against my chest, as if the shadows were squeezing the air from my lungs. Panic flared within me, but I forced myself to breathe. I had to stay calm. Then out of the void, shapes started to emerge, flickering in and out of clarity. They looked like figures, but they were distorted, their faces twisted into expressions of fear and sorrow. I wanted to look away, but something held my gaze. "Help us," they murmured in unison, their voices thin and worn, like echoes bouncing off the cabin walls. "It's not too late." "What do you want from me?" I shouted, but my voice was swallowed by the darkness. I felt vulnerable and exposed, surrounded by these lost souls. They reached out, fingers grasping at nothing, as if desperate for connection. Suddenly a burst of light flickered beside me, blinding and illuminating the silhouettes all at once. I squinted against the brightness, my heart racing. In that moment of clarity, I saw the figure from before, no longer flickering but solid, standing right in front of me. "It's you," I said, disbelief and fear coursing through me. "You're the one who needs help." "Yes," it replied, voice stronger now. "But it's not just me. They were trapped first." I didn't understand. Trapped? How? Why? "The heart of the woods. Find it and you will uncover the truth. But beware," it warned, eyes narrowing. "The creature feeds on fear. It grows stronger with every moment you hesitate." The ground beneath me trembled. I remembered the howl. The creature was still out there, lurking just beyond reach. My heart pounded in a frantic rhythm. I couldn't let it find me here. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, trying to visualize the forest. "What do I need to do?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "Follow the voices," it directed. "They will lead you to the center. But hurry. Your time is running out." Before I could argue, the darkness swirled violently, the figures fading back into whispers. The grip of fear tightened around me, and I felt myself being pulled again. Then everything snapped back into place. I gasped, back in the cabin, the familiar walls surrounding me. But now, they felt more like a prison. The smell of damp wood hung thick in the air. I glanced nervously at the door, still rattling from the creature's blows. I have to find the heart, I whispered to myself, fear and determination igniting an unexpected fire within me. I grabbed the pendant tightly and glanced out the window. The moon shone brightly, illuminating the dark treetops. I had to trust the voices and move. Taking a deep breath, I opened the cabin door knowing there was no turning back. I stepped out into the night, the shadows wrapping around me like a cloak. The voices were faint but persistent, guiding me deeper into the woods. As I moved further away from the cabin, the air felt thicker, charged with something ancient and wild. I heard the growl again, closer this time. The creature was on my trail. That's when I saw it. A flicker of light in the distance pulsing like a heartbeat. It was the center. I had to reach it before the creature found me. Turning towards the light, I felt a surge of adrenaline. It was now or never. I sprinted through the underbrush, branches clawing at my arms as I pushed deeper into the darkness. Each step felt like a race against time. The flickering light pulled me forward, a beacon in the midst of overwhelming shadows. I could hear the creature's growl echoing, visceral and hungry, a constant reminder of my impending doom. The voices around me were growing louder, merging into a chaotic melody that urged me on. "This way, quickly!" they cried. The sound was both comforting and terrifying, as if I had become their last hope. Suddenly, the ground softened beneath my feet. I stumbled, nearly losing my balance, and fell to my knees in the damp moss. The flickering light danced closer, and I could make out a clearing just ahead. The trees parted like a curtain, revealing an open space bathed in a strange glow. With renewed determination, I crawled through the last few brambles and emerged into the clearing. My breath hitched in my throat as I took in the sight before me. A massive stone altar stood at the center, covered in ancient runes that pulsed with the same energy as the light. The air hummed with something alive, a force that made the hair on my arms stand on end. Was this the heart of the woods? I staggered towards the altar, mesmerized by the intricate carvings. They felt familiar, like pieces of a puzzle I had been searching for all my life. As I hovered my hand above the stone, a jolt of electricity shot through me. I gasped, pulling back instinctively. "What do you want?" I called out, unsure if it was the altar or something else that might respond. "Free us," the voices chimed in harmony, suddenly merging into a chorus that filled the clearing with urgency. "Your fear feeds it, but your courage will save us. Touch the heart." I hesitated. Was I strong enough to confront my fear? Could I break this cycle of darkness? Before I could lose my nerve, the growl tore through the trees again, louder than ever. The creature was drawing closer, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground beneath me. I could feel its hunger, its desire to consume my fear. It was a feeling that settled in my bones, icy and oppressive. Without thinking, I pressed my hand against the rough surface of the altar. The moment my skin made contact, a wave of warmth washed over me, knocking me back. The ground quaked beneath me, and blinding light enveloped the clearing, pushing back the shadows. I closed my eyes, the brightness almost unbearable. Then everything stopped. The light faded, and I felt an unsettling calm wash over me. I opened my eyes slowly, still on the ground. The altar before me pulsed gently, and in that moment, I saw the faces of the lost souls lining the edges of the clearing. They looked at me with a mix of hope and fear, their expressions urging me to move faster. But then I realized they weren't just trapped. They were tethered to the creature. Each one represented a piece of its strength. I had to do something, but what? Suddenly a figure appeared at the edge of the clearing. It was massive, dark, and serpentine. The creature. It was now just beyond the reach of the light, its eyes glinting with malice. Time was slipping away. I knew I had to do something to confront my fear, to sever that connection. But as the creature took a step closer, I felt the ground tremble again, deeper and more threatening this time. I couldn't run now. It was right there. The only option left was to stand my ground. I took a shaky breath, gripping the pendant tightly in both hands, heart pounding as the creature moved forward, its breath hot against the cool night air. The darkness spilled around me like an approaching tide, sweeping in to erase all light. But I couldn't let it. I had to remain anchored to this moment, to the purpose that pulsed through me like an electric current. The whispers of the trapped souls surged around me, a cacophony of yearning and fear urging me forward. "Face it," they cried. "Face your fear." With a small nod, more to myself than anyone else, I stepped closer to the altar. The warmth radiating from the stone felt inviting, grounding me amidst the chaos. I wedged my foot against the ground, preparing to stand firm. The creature drew closer, and I could see its true form. It was no longer a mere shadow. It was a grotesque amalgamation of fear and darkness, a form molded by countless souls ensnared within it. The eyes glowing bright were the embodiment of those who had succumbed to despair. It thrummed with menace palpable and suffocating, ready to consume what little light remained within me. "Don't let it take you," the voices echoed again, resonating deep within my core. Summoning whatever courage dwelled inside, I shouted back, "You will not control me." As the creature lunged, I lifted the pendant, holding it out as if it could shield me from its onslaught. The ancient symbols etched into its surface shimmered, casting an almost blinding glow. I could feel the warmth spread through my fingertips, igniting a spark of defiance. "Your power comes from my fear," I yelled, my voice steady now. "But I refuse to give it to you." In that moment of resolve, the pulse of the altar synced with my heart, resonating like a drumbeat. Light exploded outward, pushing back the darkness. The creature staggered as it was met with the illumination, its twisted features drawn taut in a snarl of rage. It wasn't just shadows that it feared. It was the light, the very essence that I could muster. The trapped souls flickered momentarily, their faces becoming clearer. I had to free them, to sever their bond. "I will not let any of you be taken." My voice rang out, strong and resolute. I took a step forward, heart racing as I pressed the pendant against the altar. Suddenly the ground shook violently, a wave crashing against me as the light intensified. Blindingly bright, it spread outward, ripping through the creature's form. I felt the essence of the trapped souls, pieces of them, rising from the altar, their chains breaking free as they merged with the light, lifting the weight of despair away. The creature roared, a sound that blended desperation and fury, as it dissipated into shadows, writhing as if it could feel its very existence unraveling. The light engulfed it, the tendrils of darkness battling against the luminescence, but it was no contest. The sacrifice of those brave souls and my defiant stand pushed it back. And then, silence. The clearing blinked in and out of focus as if I had just woken from a deep sleep. The altar at the center pulsed gently, now devoid of a malevolent presence. I glanced around. The figures surrounding the altar had transformed into soft, shimmering lights, their expressions peaceful for the first time. I stood on shaky legs, still clutching the pendant as I looked at the emptiness left behind. What had just happened? I knew I wouldn't have answers, but I felt a spark of hope, knowing that I had faced something primal and malevolent. Then, in a whisper of wind and light, the voices surrounded me once more. "Thank you." They floated in the air, a gentle refrain that wrapped around me like a warm embrace. Each word resonated with gratitude, intertwining as they faded into the night. I took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift, and turned slowly back toward the path leading away from the clearing. As I stepped back into the embrace of the forest, the shadows seemed to retreat, and the air felt lighter. Perhaps the heart of the woods had truly revealed its secret. Perhaps not all questions needed answers. After I emerged back at the cabin, dawn kissed the treetops and sunlight painted the world with gold. I stood there, feeling different, less burdened and more at peace. Yet lingering uncertainties tripped at the edges of my mind. What had truly happened? Had I freed those lost souls, or was it merely a trick of the light? I didn't know. But as I took one last look at the cabin, my strange refuge and brief prison, I felt the quiet calling of the wilderness. Perhaps there were still secrets to uncover in the heart of those mountains. I may never return, but the woods would continue to pulse and breathe, alive with their ancient stories, inviting me to wonder whether darkness could always be stitched back to light.